Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the You Are Radically Loved Summit. I am joined by a very special guest today. We are talking about presence. This is a chapter on being present and what it actually means to be present. I couldn't think of a better person to have this conversation with than Avanti Kumar Singh. She is an Ayurveda expert, she is a wellness guru, and we had such a great connection when she was on my podcast. I was on her podcast, and I really value her voice and her expertise. And being as a lot of my background is studying yogic philosophy, her background is studying Ayurveda, which is the sister science of yoga. I thought it'd be a really great person to have on the summit to talk about presence. So here is my conversation with Avanti. Avanti, thank you so much for joining me at the You Are Radically Loved Summit. Are you feeling
I,
radically loved?
I am. I was loved up by you just before we started this podcast or this episode. So thank you. I do.
Well, I am. I still, that first conversation that we had on the podcast, on my podcast, then I was on your podcast and we've done some I mean, I
Hmm.
really love everything that you do. I love learning from you. I love just all of the how you created this space that somehow for me, like, even though I've studied Ayurveda for many years, it wasn't until I read your book and really had conversations with you that I really understood it. Does that
Well,
make
thank you.
sense?
I mean, it's very flattering. So thank you for saying that. I appreciate it because you've been studying this stuff for a long time. So that's high praise.
Well, today's topic is not about like everybody's gonna be like, wait, what? Are we not talking about Ayurveda?
No, no, no.
Um, we're talking about being present actually.
Mhm.
And this was a really interesting chapter for me to write because um I'm really talking about trusting uncertainty and being able to be in this fully present moment where you can allow your experiences to be a catalyst for creating something new, transformation, creating
Mhm.
some new perspective, new opportunity. So when you hear the word present for yourself, what comes up? What do you think about?
It always comes back to tuning into your inner wisdom, your inner voice, listening to those whispers. I know we've had this conversation before, but for me, getting present in this moment, as you wrote about in this chapter, the present moment is now, and then it's now, and then it's now, right? It's always coming back to what is your inner knowing saying to you? Um, and that is not easy to do. I have to actively practice it every day. And when I feel myself going out of the present moment, future tripping, past tripping, and I go down that swirl, it's like, oh boy, how do I pull myself back in to this present moment? So I think that's the big question, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's, as people would say, it's the $1 million question. What do you do to get yourself back into a state of being grounded, a state of being supported? Um, what have you, I mean, obviously, like I know your background and sort of your career path and where it led you and where you are now.
Mm-hmm.
What are there certain moments in your life where you really felt fully present, and if you did, what were those moments and how do you discern like being in that state? Because I feel that being present is one of those buzzwords that people use all the time, and oftentimes I guess maybe I'll word it like this. One of the first interviews I ever did was with Simon Sinek, and he's if you don't know who he is,
I
you
do.
should. He's, well, now I'm just saying the people, like the
Yeah,
people
he's
first,
amazing.
right?
Yeah.
He is he's an incredible speaker, author, And he said to me, we were talking about being present, and he said, you don't get to decide when you're present, right? He says, you don't get to decide when you're present. You're present when somebody else says you are, when you are in the service of another. Therefore, they get to decide when you're present. And I really liked that. And I agree and then I disagree, right? Because I'm like, I feel like there are two sides to that. There's always two sides to every coin.
Mhm.
But I like both. I like the opportunity to have both. And so in saying that, where have those present moments been in your life?
So picking up on what you just said, the way I interpret that is that when you are present to yourself, to your inner knowing, you become present to another person, right? You can be more present because when you're not present to yourself, there's no way that you're going to be present to anybody else. So I see what you're saying. At first I was like, well, I don't know if I agree with that, but actually I do, because again, the more that you're present to yourself, the more you can be present with the other person sitting right there with you. And I mean, I know for me as a clinician, this has always come up when you're doing interactions or student interactions. I teach a lot of students, I teach a lot of clients, and even, having two kids, I have two college age kids, right? And I would say for me, I didn't even learn it that well when I was in my medical training. I'll be totally honest,
Wow.
because I think I was so in my head all the time,
Mm.
trying to figure out, what's going on with the patient, what's this, what's that. And it wasn't until my kids, both each separately, they're 3 years apart, had their own health challenges. And I've talked about this on my podcast, not in my book, but they both had some pretty intense health challenges when they were in high school in their teens. So 8 years ago. Um, and I really had to find a way to become present with myself so that I could be present to them and show up for them the way they needed me to show up for them. And not just as a mother, as a parent, but just as another human being. And that was the real test for me, I think. So I absolutely agree with you about the presence being connected to other people.
Yeah, I you said something that really struck me just now. You said for yourself that you were in your mind, right? And which to me would intuit that being present is a more connected experience. It's not just mental. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
I think it's understanding it up here is one thing. I think that's where a lot of us start, especially when we're intellectual, when we're thinkers, when we're studying all these books. Like you start the chapter with talking about the Yoga Sutras, right? And reading those words, you're like, oh, okay, I get that. I think there's a connection you make between your head and your heart, right? And then you can know it in your heart. Like, I love people, I show love, I am love. That's, I mean, I exist in the world like that. I've always have, even as a clinician. But it's not until you, for me, until you make that connection between your head and your heart, that that presence becomes real for me. And that's also that connection between your mind and your inner whisper. So for me, it's kind of almost the same. The other thing I would say is that it's also experiencing it in your body and not just in your mind. So I feel like it's almost like your heart becomes, it's like this energetic chakra, this being of love and light, but there's also a physical part of it, right? It's almost like you have to feel it in your chest, feel it in your body, feel it in your gut, and make that connection from that thinking brain that's sort of like esoteric, out
Yeah.
there, can't really catch it, to something more physical. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's
no,
how
I
I'm thinking
love,
about it.
yes, I like that. Well, being as the this is the final chapter before we get into the body, I really love
Mhm.
that you're making that connection because that was actually how I structured the book originally. For this, the inside scoop is it was based on, each chapter was based on the chakras. So it was based on the subtle body system. So instead of it actually being a book about the subtle body, it's an experience of each subtle energy. And so I love that you're able to get that connection there before we transition into the space of embodiment. I I love to be able to hear people's experiences with that, because I know a lot of the times if people are struggling or they're going through a hard time, I have found personally in my experience that I'm really stuck in my head, that I'm
Mhm.
trying to think my way out. And I feel that this is where the component that you just spoke to, Avanti, about the integration process between my head and my heart, to be able to break through, to change something, to garner a different perspective, to connect to that deep inner wisdom. So, in saying that, what else comes up for you in your experience?
I mean, again, I think it's every example that I can think of from, years past to even like yesterday, right? It always comes down to that, because it is so easy to spend your entire life thinking, 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 just existing here.
Mm,
And I think that so many people do exist that way. Um, it's sort of this comfortably numb existence where you think you can think yourself out or think your way out of anything or into anything. I don't know that I so much believe that. I mean, positive affirmations, all of that's great, but I do think there's got to be some connection to the subtle body, to the heart. And again, it comes down, every example I can think of is sort of like, how did I make that connection? How did I drop into my body? So another way I think that maybe like this is a more physical piece of it, but I think how I get more present is if I'm thinking about something, like making a decision about something. I really have been, especially in the past year, been trying to tune into, how do I feel in my body when I'm making this decision? Do I feel expansive, or do I feel constricted and shut down? Do I feel open? Do I feel, like I'm connected, And so I think, again, if I'm feeling constricted, I'm not in the present moment. I'm future
mm,
tripping or past tripping for sure. Right. Because it's sort of that idea of like, in this moment, Eckhart Tolle wrote about this in his entire book, The Power of Now. In this moment, there's nothing wrong, zero wrong in this moment, and then in this moment, and then in this moment. Right. That's kind of what I was sort of thinking about when I was reading your book and this specific chapter. It's only when we go to the future and to the past that everything gets wonky, right?
yeah. Yeah. And that's what I've learned. It's not that we don't have the willpower or the desire to change or to create a new intention. It's that we bring our past with us, right? We bring the baggage of the past
Mm-hmm.
along
Totally.
with us on the train, and we've got like packs on packs and luggage and backpacks, and we just try to drag it all our shit with us all the time, and it's
Right.
exhausting, because it's you know non-localized baggage, right? That we don't actually see, it doesn't mean it's not there. And I think what you're saying is absolutely straight. It just, you hit the nail on the head with this, like being in this moment, nothing's wrong. And I talk about it also in the book. The mind wants to be anywhere but in the present moment. It's like,
Totally.
this is a great conversation. I love spending time with Avanti, but it would be even better if we were in person. And it's like,
Right.
but oh, it's really great. Oh, Avanti's here and we're having tea together, but it would be even better if we were like in Bali or Costa
I mean,
Rica,
it would be,
right?
but
But that's the thing,
right.
that's the nature of
Totally.
the mind. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Tori and I were having this conversation the other night. We were just sitting in the backyard, and it's taken us like a good portion of 2+ years to get our house finally, little things. We weren't able to remodel our entire space in one go.
Mhm.
Luckily comes from uh, uh, a very well um, experienced blue collar family where everybody
Yeah.
does all the work themselves,
Yeah,
which I'm
they know how to
so,
do it.
yeah, they know how to do it and they do a really good job. And so a lot of the work was done by him, his brother, his dad, friends of his. So
Mhm.
we're just sitting in the backyard, just really, we're done with all of our house projects, all the walls, all the painting, everything is done. And
Mhm.
we're sitting there like, do we do we need a bigger space? Like, do we should we do something else? And it's like, no, you don't need anything else. We don't need more space. We are totally happy and content and everything's fine. But we were both laughing at the fact that, wow, we wanted this moment so bad. We wanted to get to this moment so bad that now that we're here, all we're thinking about is how can
Yeah.
this be better?
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And I'm just going back to what you said because I think in every with the we do it with our partner. Is there somebody better, or like in dating, or with our bodies as women, right? Like,
Mhm.
oh, it can be better. I
Right.
can look better. I'm
Right.
trying to make it better, and it's such a insidious pathology.
It is, but there's also one thing to think about. There's nothing wrong with wanting better or more, right? So I think again, it's checking in with what is the reason,
Mm,
right? And so again, for
yes.
me, it's been really interesting to ask myself this question when I'm sort of visioning for, what next year or, or what the next thing is
Hmm.
in the way I teach or the next book or the next podcast
Yes.
episode, right? In essence, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I should be doing that. Um, and at the same time, I think I have to check in with my present moment of saying, okay, I'm at this place. I've written a book or I've done this podcast. How does it feel? Do I feel expansive, wanting that more, wanting that better? Or do I feel constricted? Because I think then you can tune into what really is the driver of that
Yes.
desire, right? I
A
mean,
thousand percent.
this is like a never ending sort of question, how much is inspired action, how much is pushing and like
Yes.
grinding. I get this question a lot from students and patients and my kids, like, how do you know,
Yeah.
right?
Well, it's that same question of discernment. How do you discern? How do you discern what is what? And the answer is only you know. Only you know,
Right.
and you have to be able to practice to figure out whether it's going to serve your highest good or not. I mean, it's again this conversation that I was just having apropos with Tori about the difference between jealousy and envy and
Mm,
how we often get those two confused. We're often times we think we're being jealous where it's actually envy. And the difference, I had to look this up because I'm like, what is the difference between envy and jealousy? Envy is I have a desire for something that you have, and so it's envy. I'm envious that have the little popper on your microphone, whatever, whatever it may be.
right.
Like I
Right.
want one of those things. And jealousy is a fear that something I have is that you're going to take it away. So the fear that you will take away something that I have, that is jealousy. Envy
Mm,
is I have a desire for what you have, right? And so there has to be that discernment with the nuisance of all of our emotions and feelings and wants. And exactly what you said. I love that you said there's nothing wrong with wanting. And it's like I
right.
can totally relate to that because if I didn't want more for my life, I wouldn't be here, right?
I mean, same story for me. I mean, first generation, right? My
Yeah.
parents came here with nothing. I wouldn't be a doctor if I hadn't wanted more. There's
Yeah.
no way, right?
Yeah. And how do we the intention is always, okay, how do you continue to discern those
Yes.
wants and needs? So again, they're serving your highest good. And going back to what Avanti said so beautifully is that journey we make from our head to our heart, that integration process where we have to feel into creating something from a wholehearted space as opposed to just in our minds, using the entirety of our experience.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, look, we can have this conversation forever. I mean, and I'm happy to do it, but I
Yeah.
want to be respectful of your time and
Yeah.
everybody else's time. So, Avanti, where can people go for more information and to connect with you? What before you say that, everybody, please get the Health Catalyst. It is Avanti's book. It came out well, it'll be 2 years because this is 2022.
Yeah.
So it came out 2 years ago. It's such an incredible read. Please, 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 your health will completely change. We'll put the links to that book as well, but go ahead, Avanti.
Oh, you can find me. Thank you so much for saying that. Really anywhere on the web, I'm avantikumarsingh.com. My Instagram handles were kind of where I hang out is on Instagram. It's Avanti Kumar Singh. So those are, and I have a podcast also called The Healing Catalyst. So
Yes. I've been on there, guys.
yes,
It's
she
good.
has. And it was an amazing episode.
So thank you so much. And for all of you watching, thank you so much for being here. The You Are Radically Loved Summit will continue. Stay tuned. We're talking about, I'm not going to tell you, it's going to be chapter 5, but we're moving into the body section of the book. So thank you again so much for being here. Much love. And
Thank you.
remember that you're radically loved. Thanks, Avanti.
Thank you, Rosie.